Hi, everybody. It's been about 4 weeks that I haven't done a hosted a guest because I've been traveling a lot, started the new semester. But boy, do I have a good one to kick off the fall semester. Sage Steele, how you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me. This is kind of cool that you asked.
Well, I'm very excited to have you. Let me just read some of your key biometrics. And as we were talking offline, father time catches up to you. So I actually have to wear the old man glasses. You were at ESPN for 16 years, from 2007 to 2023. You were a broadcaster and a lead anchor. You were a host of Sports Center, the network's flagship show. You've hosted many leading national and international events, including the Super Bowl, the Masters, the NBA Finals, the World Series, but not only sports, the Scripps National Spelling Bee. That's kind of cool. And the Miss America pageant. Did I cover some of the key highlights, or do you want to add anything before we get going?
That is plenty, but I love the spelling bee love there because honestly, that was one of the coolest events I've ever covered. And they're like, it's not a sport. I'm like, no, but it's a competition. It's a good competition.
So maybe we could start with, how did you decide? We're going to get into your story with ESPN, but how did you first decide sportscasting is what I want to do? I want to go to Indiana University and pursue that. And I ask this because you may or may not know this. I have a sports broadcasting superstar in my own family. Maybe have you heard of Ariel Helwani?
No way. I know Ariel.
You know Ariel? Well, Ariel is my maternal nephew.
No
So,
way. I
so,
love him. Tell
and
him hi. He
from
better be
a
watching.
I will. From a very young age, he always said he loved wrestling. He loved all these and he actually pursued his passion and turned it into a profession. Do you have a similar story?
Yes, but my goodness, I haven't seen Ariel in a long time. Give him a hug for me. I was sports obsessed from a very young age. I have a father who played college football at an Army at West Point, and I brag because he did so in historical fashion. He broke the color barrier. He's the first Black man ever to play varsity football at West Point back in like 1966. So some history there, and he was actually a pretty damn good athlete as well. And so dad kind of started it, and then I have two younger brothers. Honestly, I knew at a really young age the power of sports, and I can say that now. But even talking to my parents about when I announced to them when I was 11 years old at the dinner table that I wanted to be a sportscaster, I knew I wasn't going to be a great athlete. I thought the second best thing would be to talk about it and to tell people stories. And even at that young age, I remember watching the '84 Olympics and going, I want to understand how these athletes are not just good but great at the ultimate moment when the entire world is watching with one chance to run that 100-meter dash, right? I was just in awe of kind of the mental toughness to go along with the physical gifts and talents, and it wanted to tell stories from a really young age.
And did your parents do the stereotypical thing of being disappointed that you're not becoming a physician or a corporate lawyer? Or were they the
No,
type, oh, you found your passion, let's go with it?
they knew that what you mentioned there, a physician or corporate lawyer, that was not ever going to be in the cards for me. I think they like to think that, oh, she has other things she's good at. What they did say was, really? Because I was so shy. I was painfully shy. And this sounds weird, but I didn't talk to many people besides people in my family. I had a couple friends, but I was super, super shy. And they're like, okay, well, this is a good dream. And if you want to be on television, then you're probably going to have to talk a little more. So it was really from day one, like, if this is your dream, and let's talk about why, but if it's your dream, then you're going to have to come out of your shell. You're going to have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, basically, which is a line that Nick Saban taught me a few years ago. And I use it with my kids too. So from a young age, I had to learn to get out of that comfort zone if I wanted to pursue this dream. And sometimes I admit, I look, even when I was on ESPN, and I was like, how did this actually happen? But I had to kind of, make that decision to be uncomfortable.
What were some of the mechanisms that you used to overcome your shyness?
It was, being forced by my parents. Sometimes it was as simple as we had some neighbor girls in this neighborhood we had moved into in Colorado Springs. And, they had their group and their clique and they didn't need a new kid. And so my parents were like, okay, do you want friends? Well, then you have to go make that happen. Go knock on her door, see if she wants to play, see if she wants to ride bikes. I remember that. Also, we lived in Belgium. My dad was in the military for 23 years. And one of the many places we lived was in Belgium. And while there, my mom actually talked to some doctors about trying to help kids overcome shyness. And one thing these doctors suggested was to bring me around horses. And so I got into the equestrian sport, the beautiful equestrian sport, which, by the way, we had no business doing it with on an Army salary. That's the wrong business to try to, wrong salary to try to be successful in that business and that sport. But for me, it wasn't about that. My parents somehow sacrificed. My mom got a second job to help pay for me to ride because horses are very therapeutic. And what it did was it made me, as an 11-year-old kid, because I started right away after I announced this dream, in hindsight, it makes you feel needed, that this animal needs you to stay alive. And so it gave me this confidence that I was needed. And it's not like I felt unneeded at home or with my family. It was just different. And it gave me that confidence to try new things, to walk into the barn. And we had very strict British instructors, and they were adamant about certain things. And I had to stand tall and I had to speak up for myself if I wanted to be around the horses. So who knew? I now know how therapeutic and helpful animals can be.
It's very, I don't know if the right word would be soothing, but it's actually motivating to hear someone who was so public that you faced some of those difficulties, because oftentimes people think that high profile people, don't get nervous, don't suffer from anxiety, right? And so I'll tell you a couple of stories that I think, will resonate well with the story that you just shared. So I had a personal friend who's a physician to, high profile athletes. I had him on my show a few years ago. And as we were chatting, I said, can I take a guess as to what is the number one ailment that these high profile athletes come and see you about? What is it? And so he was kind of quizzical. He didn't know why I would be able to guess that. And he goes, sure, go ahead. I said, anxiety disorders. And he said, exactly. So, you mythologize the athletes as you did in the 1984, the 100-meter, gladiator sprinter. You think that they are impervious to some of these very human frailties. But if anything, what makes them champions is that they face the exact same anxieties that the rest of us face, but then they somehow overcome them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think people ask me that all the time as well. Like, do you get nervous? And the answer is yes, but I know how to handle it now, and I know where to channel it. And I actually think that adrenaline rush that I get right before I go on air or do an important show like yours, it's excitement. And what I find, though, is about a minute or two before I go on the air, I get really calm. Like, I'll have a tough hour or so leading up to it, because when I was on ESPN, you're live and it's across the country every single day. And I did 2 hours live every day, but we did all the writing. Researchers helped us with a lot of things, and producers, but everything that we really said on camera and back and forth interviewing other athletes or analysts, we wrote that. So I was able to realize, to remind myself when I would get tight and anxious, wait, you're prepared. You're ready for this because you did the work. No one wrote the stuff for me. Those were my words. And therefore you could make it conversational and take away the pressure of having to say things exactly perfectly. But it has taken many years. I don't want to lose that, though. And I'm sure a lot of the athletes have said that to you as well, right? If we lose that adrenaline, then we lose our edge. Exactly. And you lose your ability to come out and perform and be your best. So now I know that I thrive on it. I just look back and laugh a little bit about that kid who was scared of her own shadow. And I'll say this too, because you'll appreciate it, especially early on in my career. I've always talked too fast. All my bosses have yelled at me for it. And I slowed down here and there, but at the end of the day, they gave up and they realized it's just me and kind of who I am. But in order to not get sick to my stomach with nerves and anxiety at the beginning stages of my career, what I would do is, when I'd look in the camera lens like I am now, I would picture my dad. Wow. And like I was on the couch having a football conversation like I did when I was 12 years old on a football Sunday with my dad, so that you're telling a story. You're not giving a report or you're not conducting an interview. You're having a conversation, you're telling a story. And that allowed me to let go of the nerves and to really be me on camera.
That's beautiful. I want to come back to your what seems to be a very powerful bond that you have with your dad. I want to come back to that and share some of my own bond with my own daughter in a second. But just to kind of close the parenthesis on, anxiety and stress, I think it was about 5 years ago, I had the lead singer of the Stylistics. I don't know if you know who. Do you know the Stylistics? Are you familiar with that group?
No.
No, the Stylistics were part of a genre of music called the Philly sound, which was a type of soul music from the late
Yeah.
60s, early 70s, this kind of very romantic, haunting music. And there are several groups that fit that genre, the Stylistics, the Delphonics, the Moments.
Got
Well,
it.
I grew up as a young kid with this guy, Russell Tompkins Jr., singing in my ear as a child, even before I knew how to speak English. I mean, I grew up in Lebanon. And to, 4 decades later, to be having him on my show just seemed like completely impossible. How could it be that our worlds would ever intersect? He's about 20 years older than me. But in any case, the reason why I'm telling you the story, Sage, is because here's this, world-renowned soul singer. You would think he's got it together. You would think that there's absolutely no reason for him to ever experience any, jitters before going on. And I asked him on the show, I said, do you get nervous before going on? And I was praying and hoping that he would say an emphatic yes, because then I would use that answer to motivate my students when they're deathly afraid to do their oral presentations.
Right.
I say, look, hey, if Russell Tompkins Jr., the legendary soul singer, can get nervous, it's okay for you too. And his answer was, oh, I can hardly stand up. I feel like my legs are going to
Oh
buckle.
my gosh.
But what does he have to be logically, rationally? Thousands of people have paid to come and listen to you sing. You clearly know how to sing, and yet you're scared. And when I tell that story to my students, I see kind of the weight coming off them, because if Lionel Messi or Michael Jordan or this singer can get nervous, we all can get nervous.
Yes. I love that he was honest too, because I think sometimes, when people are being asked certain questions, they're like, no, or they minimize it. One thing I've found in the last couple of years through some adversity, personally and professionally, is the more people open up and share and are honest. I mean, not only is it helpful for other people, like you're saying to your students, to realize, yeah, even people at this level of whatever industry, they get nervous. It's almost therapeutic. It's been therapeutic for me to be able to share it and then to continue to push through it. So vulnerability and then talking about those things, and those, I don't even want to characterize it as a weakness when we get nervous or anxiety. No, I view it now. I've taken it at least and used it as a strength, because I know that I can make it come out with the energy that I'm using, and it's all genuine, but I love that he was vulnerable and honest with you. He didn't have to be. But more people do that, I think it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I faced a similar sort of bifurcation in deciding whether I wanted to share a personal story or not. A few years ago, out of the blue, I had what felt like, oh my God, am I having a heart attack? Am I having? And I was driving with my wife and kids. I was not in any way consciously, stressed. I wasn't ruminating over anything, and I started getting this tightness of breathing. My fingers started tingling. And so we stopped on the side. I said to my wife, I think you have to drive me to the emergency room. I don't know what's happening to me. So she drives me to the emergency room. It turned out to be a panic attack, which was the first one and the only one that I've ever had. I tend to be I'm an intense person, but I'm quite chill. I don't know exactly what triggered it, but to our conversation, I was trying to decide, should I share this, or does it go contrary to my being the happy warrior, the honey badger? And then I thought, but that would be inauthentic if I don't share that.
Yeah.
I also talk about the importance of authenticity. And so I went on the biggest possible platform in the world, Joe Rogan, and I shared that panic story. And then tons of people wrote to me and said, you don't know how much solace it gave me that you share that. So you're exactly right. It takes a lot of courage to actually show vulnerability and weakness.
And I think it goes back even further to letting go of caring what everybody else thinks too. That's why people tend to not, and I don't have the background you do, certainly. But just through my own experiences, like once you let go of caring what everybody thinks, then you're more able to be vulnerable and to share those things. And every time I have, the feedback I've gotten has been completely overwhelming. That's brought me to tears at times when people have said, thank you for sharing this. Thank you for standing up and being uncomfortable. And it is scary, but then you realize every single time you push through that fear of sharing something, for instance, then the next time it gets a little bit easier. And I feel fortunate to have realized it later than I would have liked. I try to tell this to my kids now. No, be open, say whatever you want and be yourselves and don't wait so long. And that's the biggest thing too, right? Is that if we continue to do this and share on the biggest platforms, like you said, with what you did with Joe Rogan, others are going to hopefully be better than us. And that's what we want for the younger generation.
Indeed. I want to get into all the ESPN stuff and the woke stuff and freedom of speech and all that in a second. But since we touched on the thread of your dad, before I ask you the question, so I listened to your chat with Megyn Kelly. That's how I really became familiar with your story. And I said, oh, I have to reach out to this lady. She seems fantastic. And one thing that came out, very clearly is the incredible love you have for your parents, your family, but there seems to be this really incredible reverence and love. I mean, I'm sure for your mom too, but specifically to your dad. Maybe you could tell us about that, and then I'll share some of my bonds with my own children as a backup to your story.
Yeah, I would love to hear that with you and your kids. And I talked you heard me right before we started to record, right? My mom called. I'm like, hi, Mom. And I'm almost 51 years old. I talk to my parents at least twice a day. You're never too old to need your mommy or your daddy. And I'm just so grateful that they're here and that we have this incredible friendship now, but still respect, because as much as I try to remind my teenagers about this, listen, the parents are the parents, kids are the kids. There's a pecking order here. Stay in your lane. But I just remember, and I have these great pictures of me as a really little girl when my dad was stationed back at West Point. He went back actually to help to coach football. He was the plebe, the freshman coach from 1974 to 1977, one of them. And there's these awesome pictures my mom has of me in his sweatshirt, which went from my shoulders down to my ankles. He's a big guy. At his peak, before he started to shrink, he was 6'6.5", and especially back in that day, I mean, that was massive, right? And so I would just swim in his sweatshirt and be waiting for him to walk in the door with a football in my hand, and then I'd run out to him. And I don't know, just see, this is when I get choked up, is when I talk about my parents, but just such an incredible bond, and I do think it was cemented very early on with all the moving we had to do. And when you are kind of a nomad and you don't have a place to call home because of the military, and I wouldn't change a thing, but what you have is each other. And so I have two younger brothers, and so it's the five of us, and we are so close. But in particular, the three of us are close with our parents. And my dad, I think I go back to feeling like he was so strong and just protected me and always had my back in every way, but then also really challenged me and pushed me and believed in me and pushed me when I didn't want him to, certainly, especially when you're a young kid and you're a teenager. And so it was a lot of tough love, but the love part was key. And he always came back around. And we had a lot of fun rituals when I was a little girl at night, certain things we'd say and do. Everything was always a competition. We'd have a bedroom inspection every Saturday morning, just like his days at West Point. And he'd knock twice and we'd have to salute. And he'd say, are you prepared for inspection? Of course you say, yes, sir. And he marches in there, and every infraction was 10 push-ups. Yeah. I always say that I was jacked as a young girl. I had great arms because I had a lot of bedroom infractions from the moment I was like 4 years old. But there was so much love with the respect and the discipline. And I grew quickly to respect that. And I think it's quite often there's this image or the stereotype of military men and just so rigid and not warm and loving. And I just had the exact opposite experience. But when he walked in a room, especially at 6'6.5", 235 pounds, as my father, we stood at attention. You don't mess around, but he never yelled. He was just super calm. So anyway, I'm getting into too much, but that love and respect that my father gave me and gives me is absolutely priceless. I think there is something special between a father and a daughter, very different, and mothers and sons. And I have a son and two daughters. So I kind of have, feel all of it. But man, my dad is my guy, and no one will ever replace him.
You don't know how much this is music to my ears. So let me now share my story. So we have two kids. One is 14, one is 11. The 14-year-old is the daughter. So she's now knee deep into the adolescence and the teenage stuff. And about 2 years ago, I went through a little mini, not, I mean, depression would be a big word, but I felt this deep existential blueness, if I can put it that way, because I realized that she had uh, passed the doll playing stage. So
Yeah.
that, she was my little girl, but now there were clear markers. I mean, morphologically, she didn't look as much of a little girl. And so, and in her behavioral patterns, the dolls that we used to play with together, and we even taped some of our play sessions, she was no longer interested in. And I had to kind of mourn the loss of that cognitive developmental stage, akin to how you mourn the loss of, I mean, God forbid, of a death. Well, there was the death of her very, very young childhood, right? And she was moving to another stage. And I remember when she realized that I was feeling those moments of sadness, she actually insisted that we play with each other with the dolls. But that
No
actually
way.
sorry.
No way. She felt that.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I think you'll appreciate this. It actually made me more sad because I realized that it was forced. It was terribly sensitive of her, what she was trying to do. She was trying to assuage my feelings by saying, no, no, I'm still your little girl. I still want to play. But I could clearly see that she had passed that developmental stage. So when I hear you speak about your dad in a manner that still the dynamic is still you're his little girl, it gives me great hope, because I pray that when my daughter is your age and is as accomplished as you are, that she'll be speaking about me in that way, because otherwise life would be unbearable if I thought that, she's off, she flies the coop, and that's
Yeah.
it, right?
But I just hearing that story, you have nothing to worry about. The fact that she is so sensitive and empathetic to, at a young age, to see and feel what you're going through with this, that's beautiful. And you can't teach that. So
Yeah.
you did something right there, number one.
Thank
Number
you.
two, one thing my dad, to this day, he'll say it about once a week, and he says it in emails and text messages. And when we say, I love you, he will tack on what he's been saying for 51 years.
Me more?
He said, no, we don't have that one. He calls me his little 11-month-old Seiji, because when I was 11 months old, apparently, listen, I was super athletic, walking at a very young age. Didn't turn out so well as far as the athletic side, but I mean, running to him at 11 months old when he would come home from work. And so that's what and then you run in his arms, and the dad thing, what you guys do, and you throw us up in the air. And so he literally still will say, my little 11-month-old Seiji. And then I'm like, Dad, stop, because now I'm old and I cry all the time. So it's something that is, to me, the most important relationship in a young girl's life. And it certainly continues into adulthood. And I always implore guys, friends of mine with daughters, that is everything. Don't screw it up. Meaning, don't think it's all just going to happen. You have to go make that effort, and it is everything, and it is lasting, and it affects almost every decision they make in life.
Right. I'll say one last thing about this, and then we can move on to other topics. So I just came back from Hungary, where I spoke at a summit called the Budapest Demographic Summit, talking about the importance of families, trying to increase fertility rates in Western countries, because many of the Western countries don't even are not even meeting the replacement rate. In other words, meaning that more people are dying than kids being created. And so in my keynote address, I was talking about some of the evolutionary reasons why family dynamics exist in the way that they do, and so on. And so to our conversation about the importance of fathers, I cited some work, which I hope you'll find interesting. So it turns out that father presence or father absence in a home affects the timing of when a girl gets her first menses, which the fancy term is menarche, or in French it's ménage. So that, some girls will get it at 11, some girls will get it at 13. And an environmental predictor of when that time happens is if the father is absent, then girls go into their reproductive window earlier. And
Oh,
so
wow.
even at this physiological level, so never mind the emotional level and the support and all of the things that we would expect affect the development of children in general and daughters in particular, but something as intimate and as physiological as the timing of their menstrual cycle is determined in part by the presence or absence of a father.
I have never heard that, and that is fascinating. And I was 15
Is
when
that
I was,
right?
yeah,
Well,
I
there
was.
you go. It supports. He was super present. It delayed it as far as you could take it. Proof
Which
of,
good. Listen, you guys have no idea, right? Delay it as long as possible.
right. I hear you.
That's fascinating.
All right. So let's get now into ESPN. You're on Jay Cutler's podcast. You say, I think I saw three things, but maybe there are more. Take us through that story and the trajectory that happened after that.
No, you take me through it. Oh gosh, this
Okay.
which part stood out to you?
Okay, so I just because I wanted to know what were the controversial things that got you into trouble, and from my understanding, having just quickly perused through the material, I didn't listen to the actual podcast. It was number one, it was your positions on questioning some of the COVID vaccine mandates. Number two, critiquing the fact that women were scantily clad. I couldn't tell whether that was a general statement or it applied specifically to female sports broadcasters. And then number three, you took issue with Barack Obama calling himself a black man when he had a white parent and a black parent, not unlike how your reality is. Are those the three main issues that got you into quote hot water?
Yes, they are. Let me start with the last one because I do, and I'll say this to the end, and as a journalist for 28 years, context matters and the conversation surrounding that matters. I think that's the one that bothers me the most, that was taken out of context, because most people don't have time or don't take the time from the journalistic side, really, as far as how it was handled when it all went down 2 years ago, to really listen, instead of just clicking on a link that's a 18-second soundbite. The conversation surrounding it matters. And with that, I was actually telling a story about when I was on The View in 2014 on ABC with Barbara Walters and Whoopi Goldberg and the other two co-hosts, Sherry Shepard and Jenny McCarthy, who they were all lovely, really, really kind to me, and fun. And Barbara really took issue with the fact that I called myself biracial, and why not black is what she said. So this is a complete story I told on Jay Cutler, but what came out is that Sage was criticizing Barack Obama. It wasn't really the case. I guess it could be perceived that way, but when Barbara said, well, the president calls himself black, why don't you? And I said, well, congratulations to the president. He can do what he wants. Again, it's 2014. He was president. I said, I think it's fascinating that, his black father was not there. His white mother and his white grandmother raised him. I mean, Barack Obama wrote a book about this in the absence of his father. So this was not breaking news. But to me, it was interesting that he didn't want to at all identify with half of who he is as a biracial man. That was my take on it. I said, you do you. For me, it does matter. And I always say the joke, and I always will. I'm pretty sure my white mom was there the day I was born. And I think that she matters as much as my black dad. So that's what it was. It was really that simple. And I'll always say that I would love someday, that's one of my dreams, is to be able to have a conversation with Barack Obama and any public facing biracial person, because I think it is something that it's a thing now. And if you don't say I'm black, then you're racist, or you hate your race, or you hate black people. The things that I get is, oh gosh, she hates her black father. It's all fake. Look at what she said about Obama. So listen, that goes back to us saying you got to let go of people hating you. Or what they think of you. We pay attention to a certain extent because we're human, but I know what I said. Most importantly, I know how I feel and how I treat others regardless of race. And I'm really super proud that I have the most loving, diverse family, where my white family loves me as much as my black family. I'm close to everyone. And I love seeing our big family picture where you don't know who goes with whom, because there's all different colors and mixes. And that's America to me. So I just think it's important for me to identify with all of what I am. That's literally what I am, half of each. If Barack Obama doesn't choose to, that's him. When I'm asked the question, I gave an answer. So that was the gist of it. And I will not apologize for how I choose to be proud of all of me.
And so as a result of you making those statements that proved to be, contentious for the ESPN overlords, they suspended you at that point? Is that what happened?
Yes. And initially it was more because of what I said about my employer at the time, which was that I struggled with it. I had literally just come from getting the vaccine that I didn't want to get. And I had come through, and so people look at the time, you can see in the video with the podcast, I had a Band-Aid on my shoulder, and they're like, oh, that's a prop. And it wasn't. I literally sprinted from this grocery store parking lot where I got the shot at the pharmacy, and I was late because I almost didn't get the shot. I was going to lose my job over it. I felt so strongly because this is 2 years ago and we didn't know enough, in my opinion. I just wanted to wait. Right. And so I sprinted back in and flipped up the laptop and we started talking. And so I held back a lot on my opinions at that moment. And I just said, I think it's sick and scary for companies to force people to do something to their bodies, period. But I said, I work for a global company, Disney, so I wasn't terribly surprised. And companies had that right to force people to do that. Most importantly, I complied. I complied with the mandate. Against my will, but I complied, and I had to make that decision for myself because I not only love my job, but I needed my job. And so I that was the thing. I can share an opinion while following the rules.
And was there something, I mean, yes, you had just gotten the jab and therefore that's top of mind awareness at the moment. Yeah. But what was there sort of a trajectory that you were going through that led to the tipping point of this is it, I'm no longer modulating my speech and I'm going to let it all hang out? Or, or had you not even been aware of some of these issues and you kind of found your voice? I mean, what I mean by your voice in terms of going against some of the established orthodoxy that the company would expect of you too.
No, I didn't think I had done anything wrong.
Right.
Because I followed the rules and I got the shot. I did what I had to do. And the very last day possible to be fully vaccinated by September 30th, 2021. That was the mandate. So this was 14 days prior, you needed 2 weeks, right? So it's like exactly 2 years ago. So no, I didn't think I had done anything wrong. It's interesting because it was really one of the first times I had mentioned the fact that I'd gotten divorced. And so I was more concerned about that. Like, oh gosh, I revealed something very personal. And I didn't know how that would go over, if I'd be, criticized for that as a Catholic. Like I was more concerned about that than my opinion on a mandate that I complied with. And then obviously my experience as a biracial woman, that's my experience. That's my story. So what's wrong with me sharing my story? Everyone else can. And actually everyone else, for years and years, and especially the last 2 years, has been very vocal at my former place of work about things that have nothing to do with themselves or sports. People are going on, our programming NBA shows and emotional over the Roe versus Wade decision on a sports show on our platform. So to me, I'm talking about my own personal experiences on a day off on someone else's platform. I was not concerned at all. I was pretty shocked. But it wasn't a concerted effort. Like, I'm going to stand up to this today. It was a question that was asked, and I answered him, and I answered him honestly.
Wow. Are you familiar with Jonathan Isaac? Do you know who that is?
I know Jonathan quite well. Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay. So he came on my show. I think it was about a year ago, and I thought, just what a lovely, courageous young man. And I used to before he came on my show, I would post clips of me doing some basketball moves and getting a 3-pointer, and I'd say, Jonathan, are you ready? Because I'm gonna kick your butt. So when he came on of course, I wouldn't even get 1 point on him. He's 7 foot tall, and I'm hardly that. And I just thought he was so charming, so lovely, so courageous that he says, I don't care. I'm not going to abide by things. So the reason I'm setting up the question this way, what then explains the fact that so many athletes who, to our earlier point of, being these mythical heroes that we admire, Why are so many of them so cowardly when it comes to enunciating their positions? What is the disconnect between me being able to step on the field in front of 100,000 people and be a hero, but then when you ask me to comment about something that I should be able to defend one way or another, I turn into a completely castrated moron?
Castrated moron. I love it. It's fear.
Yeah.
It's fear. And it is interesting because you look at many of these people, you know, society does, as like you said, as heroic in many ways, and most importantly, maybe a pillar of strength, physically and mentally. So then to see them go silent, I know so many of these top big name athletes who did not want to take the shot, period. And I don't know that all of them did, even though that might seem that way. But no one said anything about it except who? Aaron Rodgers and Kyrie Irving. I admire them. I know them both. I admire them so much for that courage, because it unfortunately, it does take courage to give your opinion on things like this right now, whether people agree or not. That's not what this is. It's about having respect for everybody's opinion, period, especially if they're not telling you what to do with your body or your opinion. You keep yours, I'll keep mine. You do you. That's what we always say, right? Until all of a sudden we're forced not to. Listen, I've said it before. I feel like I'm a great example as to why people do stay silent, because there are repercussions when you speak up and when you're your true self. There's a lot of money on the line. I experienced that part, but with those athletes, it's 100-fold, right? I mean, it's tens of millions of dollars. That's why when you look back at what Kyrie Irving did, people can say what they want about Kyrie. I understand he's controversial, he's different, whatever. But Kyrie, in this moment with this example, chose to say, no, my $34 million annual contract comes secondary to me standing up for what I believe in and what I believe is best for my body. Right. And then pointing out the hypocrisies of the mandates throughout the sports world. And so I admire them for doing it anyway, and the flack that they took. And now it's interesting because a year, 2 years later, the tide has certainly turned and we have learned more and more. So regardless of anyone's opinion, that's the thing that makes me sick, is when you're attacked for just being you, when that's what everyone's preaching right now, right? Be true to yourselves, and it doesn't matter whether it's race, gender, all the different gender things that are out there now. I mean, let's just be consistent. To me, it begins and ends with diversity of thought. And that's what I hope my platform can be going forward, Gad, is because diversity of thought, like, it's easy for us to say, no, we must accept people of all different colors and races and religions and genders. That's a given now. We have departments that DEI, massive departments throughout every industry in corporate America now, big or small, DEI and equality. And to me, we're forgetting the most important thing. It begins with diversity of thought, because then if I respect your thought process, then it's just, I respect how you choose to identify. I respect how you choose this and that. We are making it so much more difficult. And what we're doing is completely dividing. And yes, in the sports world, it is so prevalent, but I've had so many of those guys whisper to me. Some of the biggest, and one of them in particular came up to me years ago at a big sporting event. I don't want to say it because it might reveal who he is. And he's like, I'm watching what's going on, girl. And he's like, I got you. And I'm like, do you? Because if you did, you would not even agree.
Exactly. You wouldn't do it behind the shadows.
Right. And this is as big of a person. Like, you would just say, listen, guys, stand down. Why are we attacking this woman, this person, for being true to herself? Right? Why? But instead, they stay silent. And it is interesting to me because these are men for the most part. So I don't know. I guess I grew up with a real man in my household with my dad, who wasn't afraid to do so, to speak his mind kindly and to defend others when it wasn't even popular. And I would like to see real men stand up, and women, because we are as strong, right? And as important and as brilliant and vocal, to stand up and really just condemn the hatred that is spewed when you choose to just be yourself. It is so hypocritical of what is being preached out there today.
Well, by the way, I've had many free thinkers on my show, and many of them actually were women. Yeonmi Park, who was a North Korean defector, Ayan Hersey Ali, who escaped the brutality of some of the female genital mutilation in Islam. And so certainly women are holding their end of the bargain when it comes to some of these issues.
But I'll say this, what they're not doing right now is holding up their end of the bargain with the transgender and sports issue. And the
True.
silence with that has broken my heart. I've been part of trying to, with ESPN had a wonderful program and bringing women together at a summit every year. And I mean, women from across the world, the Middle East, where they're not allowed to go be female sports journalists. We'd bring them in and mentor them. And it was hear me roar and stand tall and fight for equality with wages and salaries and all the things that you see throughout the sports world with women now. And every last one of them is silent.
Yeah.
Literally. I'm blown away at the silence from women with all that we've done and fought for 50 plus years now with Title IX. And the biggest names are silent. And that's what breaks my heart. I can separate. This is nothing against the transgender community because we need to figure that out. They are important. And we need to not take away, not or, right? But and we need to not take away from what we have fought so hard for as women, and so many men who have fought for us along the way. The majority of the people who helped me along the way, 99.9% of them have been men who wanted me to succeed despite what society wants us to believe. So I am beyond disappointed, and I'm trying to watch my language with how silent women have been, because I feel if we banded together, and I've asked for this on social media, who am I, right? I don't know, but I just have this little platform and people have watched me talk about sports and uplift women for all these years. Like if we came together, this would change on every level. And
Indeed.
For some reason we are silent. So I do feel that remaining silent, it's on us if we continue to do that.
I mean, I know exactly what you're speaking of because no industry is more woke than academia. That's where all the woke ideas originate from. And there isn't a greater density of cowardly, silent types more than there is in academia. So I can completely empathize what you're saying. Two more questions because I want to be very mindful of your time. I could keep you here for another 5 hours.
I know. I want to talk to you forever.
Exactly. Thank you. But we'll do it again, I'm sure. So I want to just cover one more question on wokeness, and then if we have time, maybe we'll talk about happiness. It'll be a very short conversation on happiness.
We'll make time for that. That's important. Yes.
Okay. So question one, this is coming. So one of the things that I teach is consumer behavior. I'm a professor of marketing as my official title. And so one of the first principles you learn in marketing is segmenting and targeting the market, right? You segment the market into different niches, and then you target each of those niches in different ways because these consumers in each of these niches have different needs, different preferences, and so on. So now let's take the sports industry. Most of the people that you stereotypically think of that are consumers of sports are probably going to be people who are not very woke. Like, so think about the Budweiser thing with Dylan Mulvaney, right? You're creating a marketing strategy for 0.01% of the population when most of your drinkers of Budweiser don't really care about this issue of transgender thing one way or the other. It's not that they're transphobic. It's just not on their radar. So what explains the disconnect between the fact that most athletes, I'm almost willing to bet, are not as woke as we'd like to think. Most of the fans are not very woke, and yet the suits are the ones who are pushing the wokeness. Is there some way to, build a bridge for that incongruity?
I don't know, because the thing is, I think a lot of the people at the top making those decisions actually aren't as woke as we're led to believe. But there's societal pressures. Listen, I have been blown away, and I witnessed it for 16 years where I last worked. And I think that's probably the best focus, because before that, the word woke really didn't exist, I feel like, until maybe 8-10 years ago. But I feel like these companies are making massive decisions based on what happens on Twitter or X and social media in general. And I've seen it, and I have experienced it. And then they're very reactive, right? And oh gosh, if we don't do this, and we won't look like we're accepting or tolerant, and let's add another color to the rainbow and another letter and a plus sign and whatever else. And I think at the end of the day, listen, there's always going to be extremes. And people, you know, even sadly, when you say, let's end racism, guess what? That's never going to happen because they're human beings. And it's just not going to happen. Can we address it more? Absolutely. Should all of us be playing our part? Heck yeah. And holding others accountable and companies accountable, yes. But to go to this extreme, I don't understand. I also think it's just stupid based on business models. At the end of the day, Michael Jordan said it perfectly back in the 1980s,
Republicans have running shoes, or whatever the expression,
Republicans buy sneakers
That's
too.
it.
And it's so simple. And it doesn't actually matter if it's Republican or Democrat. That was the example that he gave when he was getting criticized for, well, you're not saying enough. Tiger Woods was criticized for not, you know, being woken up in many ways, even though I don't think that phrase was used at the time. At the end of the day, I think if you are any television network, you want everybody watching your shows, don't you? You don't want just one side or the other, whether it's Budweiser, whether it's a type of clothing brand, no matter what it is. I want everyone to absorb, to buy my product, because I make more money that way, don't I? Right. So why do you choose anything? Choose a side. And sadly, what I think it does, and it's just marketing and sales, but what it actually does is it divides further. And that's what breaks my heart, because you can see it and you can feel it, and you felt it a lot the last 3 years in particular. I think the combination of COVID and the lockdowns and just the fallout from it, as well as what happened with George Floyd and then defunding the police and all of these things. I think that's where my heartbreak lies the most, based on my upbringing, where it really wasn't a color thing. It was just accepting everybody. We all knew that, hey, I'm the new kid this year. Next year, it's that kid. And you just start, it was a beautifully diverse upbringing. That's all I knew. But now what this has done, it has divided more. The conversations I have with my kids, and I have a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old, 2 in college at High Point University, which, by the way, amazing as far as really accepting kids and their diverse opinions and allowing conversation. I can't even tell you, I'm so grateful for that place. So 2 there, and then a third is a senior in high school here. And the conversations that they have in classes, it's really fascinating what is being taught. And I just keep saying to them, listen, if you stay silent, going back to our prior topic, if you stay silent about that, then that's on you. But if you do it in a kind way, like, let's encourage the discussion. And teachers, that's your job. You owe that, without giving your opinion on some of these controversial topics. But to me, it's just overall, whether you look at the university level, or, you know, there's certain places I would not allow my children to go because of that. And that's business related as well, right? So why choose? Why divide? What it ends up doing is completely what they're preaching against.
Right.
I don't know the why. I wish I were smart enough to have that answer, but I do know that if it continues down this path, it's just going to continue to get worse. And my parents, who've been married for 52 years as an interracial couple, right? Getting married off of the civil rights era, where it was a brutal decision. My mom's family disowned her because she was marrying a Black man. Like, for their perspective, for them to say, my goodness, we haven't felt this in any aspect of our lives since then, that says something. We are in a deep hole here. And I think if we don't face it and have these conversations, thanks to you, then it's just going to get worse. And I'm just not going to be silent about it anymore, though, because I feel like I'm complicit if I don't talk about it.
Beautifully said. Last question, and I know that it deserves a lot more time than what we have, but notwithstanding some of the personal tribulations that you faced, you know, you mentioned earlier that you got divorced. That has to be painful. I know that your father has been ill. That's a very difficult situation to go through. You went through your trials and tribulations with ESPN. Yet, from the little that I know of you so far, you have this radiant, positive aura. You have this smile. So, what is the secret to happiness? And the guy who's asking it is the one who wrote the book with the subtitle 8 Secrets. So teach me, Guru, how is it that you are so happy?
So, first of all, can you please send me a book? I'll pay for it. Will you autograph it for me?
I will. It's done.
That I just love it. And I think, not having read your book yet, but knowing the premise of it, it is a choice. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have bad days and down times and be sad, because I have been so sad and heartbroken and devastated over the last, I'd say, 4 years, with work and with personal life and tough decisions, right? And watching my father's battle with 2 cancers, and it's just so much, right? Things are a lot bigger than what I've been through with my little work thing. First and foremost, my faith has never been stronger. And I was raised Catholic, and you go through what you're supposed to go through, and you go to mass every Sunday, and you sit and you stand and you kneel and you say the Our Father, and then you go on and you come back next week. And now it's just a lot bigger than that, because at the times when I've been absolutely broken and scared and feeling like not only was I hated by the world, God was mad at me too for personal decisions with the marriage, and I asked for help, and I got that. This is a story for another day. It's really deep. But I got some very clear answers from God that I think I probably was receiving before, but was maybe not willing to open my eyes enough to see. So for me, it is very much faith-based. And secondly, I just live in gratitude, which is related to the faith, I think, but it's more so based on how my parents raised me, raised the 3 of us. And I am just so blessed and so fortunate in so many ways. How many kids, we ask kids all the time in kindergarten and on up, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, I got asked that question, and the answer from when I was 11 years old, and I got to do it. No one gave it to me. I worked my ass off for it. By the way, I have a sign over there that says, I love Jesus, but I cuss a little, so forgive me. That's my favorite sign right now. I keep trying to be better. Sorry, Mom. But I worked my butt off for this. No one gave me anything. And during that time, like, I did it. I fought through those fears with the help of a lot of other people, right? As well. It certainly is a village. But I got to live this dream at the highest level. And so yes, I was beaten up along the way, but there's so much more good than bad. The people in my life because of it are incredible. So I just feel like, I do feel like happiness is a choice. And you can choose to focus on the good or the bad. You don't ignore the bad, because I think that makes you more grateful for the good. But, it's funny with all this blowing up. I mean, I'd never talked to an attorney really in my life about anything until I decided to stand up for myself with my employer. So when I say scared to death, you have no idea, especially as the sole provider 100% for my entire family.
Wow. Well,
next year I'm gonna have 3 kids in college at once, right?
Yikes. Yikes.
But and I'm sorry, it's such an emotional topic, and I'm so glad that you can feel my happiness, because I am, even though I literally don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know what is next career-wise. I know what I want, but I have parents who love me. I have a very small, tight, incredible circle of friends. That circle has gotten smaller and smaller lately, for sure, which was a tough process, but a much needed one. I have my faith in God and others and humanity in general. I think there's so much more good in the world than we hear about these days. And that's kind of my mission, is to point that out with this little platform I might have for who knows how long, and then to live it, not be hypocritical. So and by the last thing, again, I have 3 babies. They're not babies, right? But I have 3 kiddos who are watching the way that I handle things. And trust me, they see me melt down. They see me, not be the best mom at times, not have the most patience, not say the right thing, be a hothead at times for sure, but they know where my heart is. And I hope that others can try to remember that when dealing with people, whether it's like this on social media or at the grocery store. Everybody's dealing with something. And if we lead with kindness, maybe more people can feel happy. I just feel fortunate.
Well, if I can end it on the following note, you exude grace, kindness, positivity. You're all around lovely, and it's been such a delight talking to you. Please stay on the line so we could say goodbye offline officially, but please come back anytime. Best of luck.
I wish you got me all choked up talking about such happy things. Honestly, I say to my kids since they were little, I'm like, no, I cry happy tears, because I do. So this is my once a day happy tears. So can you feel my virtual hug? Can we do this in person next time?
I can't wait. I can't wait to meet you in person. You truly are delightful. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Still crying.